Hello. Today we're going to go over a designer-developer handoff process using Pagedraw. So imagine I'm a designer and I just finished this main screen in Sketch of a movie app that's today featuring The Lion King, which is one of my favorite movies. Here we're actually assuming that in our Pagedraw doc, in our Pagedraw project, there's already a doc called master, which right now just has our component library. In a different video, we're going to go over how to actually import this component library and add functionality to it. But let's assume for now that this component library exists in Pagedraw and already has functionality that's specified in our code base. So the first step is obviously just grabbing the sketch file and dropping it in to Pagedraw. This is going to import it into a completely separate doc, and we're going to copy paste from that doc into our master doc. So here it is. I can just select the main screen and Command C, Command V in the other doc, and we have it here. So the first thing that we notice is that there's this source component not found everywhere because I purposefully left the symbols that got imported from Sketch in this Sketch import doc because I know that I'm going to replace them by the ones that already have functionality that are here in Pagedraw. These ones just got imported from the sketch file, and they are just visual. They don't have any functionality. So we're just going to leave them there and actually use the ones that work. So the first step here is to actually go over all of these guys and replace them by an instance of each of these components. So rating in this case, we're going to do submittable input, which is this guy. And in these three cases, we're going to do tab, but I actually have to pass props down to the tab. So I need to do text, in this case should be, I think, popular, and this should be selected. This one should be browse, and this one should be new. Cool. Now, the second thing that we notice is that when we import from Sketch, we might get some of these red lines, these red dashed lines, which is basically Pagedraw telling us that there's some overlapping blocks happening. Usually when you're working in Sketch as a designer, you don't really worry about whether some of your blocks are overlapping or not, because this doesn't really matter in Sketch because everything is just visual. In Pagedraw, if you have overlapping blocks, this forces us to actually generate position absolute code, which is why we show you the red lines, because you probably don't want that. So in this case, it's very easy. You actually just make this text box smaller. And now, as a designer or anyone who built the screen, I can actually go onto the next phase, which is called stress testing. I select the artboard and I click the stress test button. This takes me into a different mode, which basically lets me test the screen that I built in Sketch with different screen sizes. Okay, so first we notice that for different screen sizes, everything here is very static. It's not flexible at all because we haven't specified any constraints. The way to specify constraints in Pagedraw is you can select any of the blocks. You can go to these flexible left margin, flexible width, flexible height checkboxes. In this case, for example, in the sidebar, we probably want to have a flexible height. So I just tick the flexible height button, and there we go. That's probably more what we expect here. But still, there's more stuff to be done. So often the invert constraints button up top is helpful. So I can just click it and it does something that is usually reasonable, but usually you have to still tweak it a little bit. So for example, the sidebar, it chose to make the sidebar flexible width, which I actually don't want. I wanted to have fixed width. And it chose to make this image also have flexible width and height, where I actually only want flexible width in this case. And I want this image to be of cover type, so we don't lose the aspect ratio there. And there you go. This is more like it. Cool. So now the second part of stress testing is not only screen size, but also data. I can click D, and it's going to show me already what are the components here that I have. But also it lets me click on text, for example, and make text dynamic. So I just said that this is dynamic because it's going to change based on some variables. This is also dynamic. This is dynamic. The director's name, the image is dynamic, and this here is dynamic. More than that, I also need to show that this comment is probably going to be a list. So in order to make this a list, I'm going to wrap this in a block and say that that block repeats. Cool. And I'm going to add some space between the elements. And we can see what happens once we go back into stress testing mode, where now stress testing is not only going to give us different sizes, but it's going to give us different data that we can see how the design is going to look like for that data. Cool. So now I, as a designer, I can basically look and verify that this is kind of what I want. These guys are, for example, not flexing. So I can go in and actually see here that there's a flexible width that I still have to set. There you go. Now they're flexing. And this can all be seen with stress tester. And I can do random data. And I can also decide, for example, this element is where the ear is supposed to go, and I might not want it to wrap. I might want it to have something like the cut off long text with ... which could be more reasonable in this case. That's up to you. Cool. Now, this is basically the design phase done, where I decide how my data should look like when it gets to a different size and when I have different screen sizes. Now this is ready for a developer to pick up. Cool. So now I, as the developer, I'm going to put on my developer hat, and I'm going to go to the code sidebar, and I'm going to select any of the blocks inside here, because the code sidebar is actually about the component, not about each block. So the code sidebar, it has two parts. The first part is all of the inputs that this object expects. This object, I mean the main screen component. And it has how are these inputs, how are these variables being used. Okay. There are some things that I already have to fill out here, and it's showing me in red, but I'm probably going to just change all of these. So I can click on these and see where they're being used. They got created when the designer hit D for dynamic and selected that the Lion King here is dynamic. So this is not this.props.text anymore. I'm going to name this something like this.props.movie title. And I'm going to say that the object input is movie title. This guy, image source, I'll leave it at image source. I think that's fine. This one is movie ear. So this is movie ear. Text 3 here, this one is movie description probably. And text 3, movie description. Text 4, it's the directors. So movie directors. And let's see, text 5 is actually something that isn't directly coming from main screen because it's a part of this list. So I'm actually going to have a list of reviews here. So in this.props.list, this is going to be something like this.props.reviews. And that's the list that gets passed down to the repeat block here. And each element in that list is actually going to be just LM. Now, I also need to say what happens on submit. So on submit for this element, what happens when someone types something and, for example, hits enter. So I'm going to just pass down a function here that I'll call this.props. On add comment. And set rating, I'm just going to say this.props.set rating. And that's the rating for the movie here. And the rating is also dynamic and it's not showing up here. So I actually just realized that I have to go back to the draw sidebar. And here in the props, I see that I can change the rating, but I actually want to also make the rating dynamic. So I can go back to the code sidebar and specify that the rating comes from this.props.rating. Okay. Cool. Now I should be ready to actually use this main screen component from my code. I can open up index.js and do something like import app render from Pagedraw / main screen. And this is all being synced by the Pagedraw CLI here. So the main screen plus all the other components from here are being synced by the CLI in the background. So I can just import that. And right now we're just returning hello world in our Webpack server here. I'm actually going to return the app render. This is still not going to work because we're not passing down any props to it. So for example, there's no reviews. So I actually already have a bunch of these things built for me. So I'm just going to copy paste that. So my constructor just sets up like a single movie that has movie title, movie year, movie description, and director. So I actually call this movie director. Let me go back to Pagedraw and change the name to director. Reviews is correct, and rating is correct. And now in my render function, I can just pass all of those things down. And there's this function change movie that we can also do later. Cool. So app render, change movie, I don't want to do for now. This is for a different tutorial. So app render is now passing down movie title, director, movie year, reviews, on add comment. So let's see if this is working. So there's one more thing that I forgot. My review object actually has a content property, and I forgot to use that in the code sidebar. So back to the code sidebar. Instead of just passing down element in this list, I'm going to pass down element.content. And that should fix this problem. There you go. Cool. So here you see Monty Python and the Holy Grail is the movie being passed down. And it is here. Let's see if the app is working. Can I type comments? Yes, I can type comments. Hello world. Can I change the rating? Yes, I can change the rating. Awesome. Cool. Thanks for watching this tutorial. Look forward to seeing you building cool apps with Pagedraw.